Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Philip Lee, one of Ireland's fastest growing corporate law firms and expert advisors at the heart of the Dublin and London startup, fintech, and crypto communities. On the show this week, we've got...
Hi guys, I'm Filipe Pereira, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Crowdclass.
And...
Hello, I'm Mario Frade, and I'm co-founder and CMO of Crowdclass.
Crowdclass is a Web3 protocol for online education using the power of blockchain, tokenization, composability, and the metaverse to create new monetization models for online educators and better learning environments for students to grow and develop. Crowdclass are the third of 10 founding teams forming the Launchpool Web3 Techstars Accelerator class of 2022 that we've got on the show over the next few months. In this episode, we talk to Filipe and Mario about the crisscrossing of their lives and careers with that of their co-founder and CTO, Bruno Costa, and how that has resulted in the formation of the Crowdclass founding team. The shortcomings of the online education experience today for content creators, instructors, and students, the longer-term vision for Crowdclass, and how Crowdclass will get to market in 2022. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. Why don't we start with Filipe and have you walk us through your backstory and how you got to this point, yeah?
Perfect. Of course. Happy to do that, Pete, and thanks for having us here. Well, in short, I was born in Porto, Portugal, and I guess I can start my backstory in the university years. I studied software engineering, which brought me into the tech world. I actually never coded after that, but during my university years, I was very involved in clubs and student associations. And I was actually particularly involved in a European group that was very focused on organizing activities for student development. And that kind of led into when I finished school and college, I actually founded a small startup focused on delivering non-formal education, training, and workshops for youth. It was called Get Skilled. And that's how my passion for education kind of started. The startup ended up being closed, but later on, I moved into the more corporate world, worked a couple of years as a consultant, was a corporate trainer at KPMG, and then I kind of felt the need to go back to the startup world. That's when I moved back into the startup world. I moved to London, joined Hillgate, which was a marketplace for freelance strategy consultants, was a salesperson and a business development manager there. Eventually came back to Portugal, continued to work on startups, was leading sales at ProdSmart, where I had a chance to scale a team and revenue of up to 1 million ARR. And at some point, I was starting to get more and more curious about this Web3 world, crypto world, and I moved into a protocol, a bPro network, which is a Web3 protocol for decentralized software development, where I was the head of ecosystem there. That kind of made me go deep into the rabbit hole of Web3. At some point, meeting again Mario, working together with Bruno, kind of laid the final foundation to getting started our own project. And it's this mix of experience in Web3, corporate startups, training, that kind of made us found Crowdclass and where we are today.
Totally. Yeah. And I could see that in your background and going through all of that, Filipe, in that seeing even before Get Skilled with Best Porto, with a nonprofit organization,
Yes.
and getting some of that nonprofit into your blood before you became a capitalist, right? Which is a good thing.
No, it gave me good foundations, actually.
Absolutely.
It did. It definitely did.
And then the teaching and training with the startups you were working with, doing some pre-sale support, obviously teaching and training when you're doing pre-sale support, that true startup bones with ProdSmart, and then seeing that part of LinkedIn where you've got some skills listed and people will, give you a thumbs up for that, right? So for Filipe, team management, public speaking, and training delivery, like those were your top three. It's like, okay, you kind of get all this and see it all coming together. So
I love the classroom environment. I really do.
Yeah.
I really do.
It's electric, it's energetic, hopefully most of the time. And even sometimes when I was delivering training to people or delivering a guest lecture, you raise your tone of voice when you make eye contact with somebody who's falling asleep. or you don't make eye contact with them because their eyes are closed, right? Hopefully not too many of us get into that situation. But listen, I get your angle of coming at this, Filipe, so thank you. Mario, why don't we do the same thing with you, yeah?
Yeah, no, sounds good. So, hello everyone, and thank you very much, Pete, for having us. So, a little bit on myself. So, I'm born and raised in sunny Lisbon, Portugal, much sunnier than Porto. I will add.
It's true. I have to say that it's true.
Yes. So in the south. So I'm picking up on university too. So I studied physics engineering, right? And I studied in Portugal and in the Netherlands, in Eindhoven. And during the college years, I was in the same institution as Filipe. So it was in the same international student association that tried to give education opportunities to students. And that's how we met, actually. So, and it's also where I met my wife, and Filipe was there when I met her many years ago in these events. So before that, I was in music. I was always very actively involved in music before that. And then, continuing, like I ended up specializing in nanotechnologies and medical instrumentation. I did some, academic research. I worked at the hard tech, what we today would be called a hard tech startup in the medical field. And after doing some publishing, I decided to switch to business. There was a company that I had seen before called Procter & Gamble, a big FMCG company. And I started working in marketing by chance, because when they called me up, it was for a logistics position. And I said, okay. But then I was traveling when they called me for the interview. So when I came back, it's like, oh, we have marketing. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do that. and that's basically how it started, my career over 10 years in marketing and sales, basically. And in Procter, I was really lucky to be able to be selected to enter there, because it has a very deep culture of training, coaching, peer-to-peer teaching. It's very, very, very strong in the business. It's something I always appreciate, and I did a bit of. And so when I left to move to Iceland, which is where my wife's from, and I moved to go to Iceland to her, and I started working at basically like a Nestle type company there. And I did marketing, did sales, did a lot of development, because there were improvement opportunities, people development improvement opportunities in production, in finance, in marketing, in sales. And then from there, I moved to Coca-Cola in Iceland, but I didn't stay too long because I had a family issue in Portugal. So I moved back to Portugal, and I started working at the Carlsberg brewer in Portugal. So my first position was as head of innovation management. So I was basically, me and my team, we were designing and operating the innovation operating system, let's put it like that, of the company. Also with strong connections to, outside ecosystems like universities. And after that, I took basically marketing and product for the core business of Carlsberg. And in between these things, I've always had, I did quite a bit of corporate training inside the companies where I was at, also to other institutions and other companies outside of where I was working. And also had some strong connections to universities and did a bit of lecturing. So when basically I was quitting my job to move back to Iceland in January of this year, a few months before, me and Filipe started talking, because I went to him because of we trying to find someone to hire for a position in the company. And then we started talking again about Web3, and I already had some knowledge of it, but he deepened my knowledge into it, and we jumped in on this.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And with you, Mario, and seeing, some of the core at the beginning, just like what we mentioned with Filipe, with that first experience after university being a nonprofit, and then in training, that hardcore research and being able to understand what's going on in certain situations, but then driving that into product management, speaking 6 languages as you do, right? The brand management, strong capabilities there. Obviously, all of this from a marketing perspective, innovation, it just seems like you guys are a good match. Now, the fact that you've been friends already before all of this, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that you've just kind of shared some of that listen, Filipe's brought you into this and, getting you into Web3 and getting you thinking about this. But you always had these training bones as part of what you were doing in this delivery of content. Why did it make sense for you guys to come together to do this?
That's a good question, and again, it's like me and Mario. We always kept in touch over the years. I was in Porto, he was in Lisbon, but we met in these events that we had. But we kept in contact through the years, And so, like Mario said, right, at some point, I was getting deeper into Web3. Mario was also on the process of leaving and looking at new things to do. I was already thinking on what could we do on the Web3 stage. And we just start naturally chatting about opportunities, ideas, and things started to click. And in the meantime, Bruno also came into the picture, which is our other co-founder, is our CTO. And Bruno, he was also part of this association in Porto. He's a very close friend of mine for many, many years. We studied together in college. He took a more traditional software development career than I did, although he did some work in some growth hacking roles. He was mostly a software developer. He was a freelancer, always with an entrepreneurial spirit. And very enthusiastic about blockchain too, and crypto. And at some point, me and Mario, we were discussing our ideas for 2022, and we had this idea for Crowdclass. Then I was speaking with Bruno on a total parallel conversation in one day, and he said, "Oh, next year I'm also going to look into working on more opportunities related with Web3." And I was like, "Well, I am looking for a CTO." And he said, "You are?" Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah.
And then Bruno came into the picture, and we kind of all connected very well. Again, we have very similar values, which kind of create the glue between all of us. But then we have a very interesting skill set among all of us.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe I'm a bit more the generalist here, who's kind of giving the overall stewardship of the boat, but Mario has a great knowledge on marketing, on communication, on research. Like you mentioned, we've been doing a lot of research practices even on the product side of things. And Bruno comes with all the technological background. He's a full stack developer working on front end or back end, and kind of this skill set kind of complements all of us very well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's good that you brought up Bruno, and we, can't forget about Bruno. And, I
We
obviously
do talk about Bruno.
we do talk about Bruno.
We do talk about Bruno.
We do.
in this
Bruno
podcast.
Costa, big shout out to Bruno. Obviously this was the first leap that he made with you guys. I did see him make the second leap, which was off the Barna Pier into Galway Bay a few weeks ago. I had got in the day before. He went in the day after. And so awesome. What, Mario, from your perspective, why does this make so much sense? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I think, we were all at that stage that we all wanted to do something of our own, where we can bring our unique perspective in a way that creates value to the world. And we were at the stage of our careers where it kind of all blended together that we could do this and that we would all wanted to do this at the same time. Second, we all have this education backbone into us. And as we all wanted to do this, and as we wanted to do something in Web3, right? So suddenly we got the opportunity to blend these two things together, right? This education backbone from back in the past, this Web3 knowledge that we have, and other business and marketing knowledge. So I think it was like the combination of these things that happened together in time, plus the availability, plus the right level of maturity, I would say, of the technologies are coming into it, and of market interest, that makes a lot of sense that we bet on it now. And I think there's another thing that triggered this, which was, it's not when we talk about education, but because online education, particularly after COVID, really took, it really took a leap when it comes to the importance to society. So, there was a big mix of societal, environmental, and personal factors that I think means that this is the right thing for us to do now, and for us to try to make the world a better place in our own way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I just got back from a breakfast meeting with a friend who I hadn't seen since before COVID. And it's that, we were both talking about how much this has changed everything in terms of how you're spending your day. And that hour that I used to waste going into town for meetings that I probably didn't need to do in the city center of Dublin, and then an hour to get home at best. Sometimes if you're lucky, it's 45 minutes. That's 2 hours of your day. When I said, I'd much rather just have breakfast with you rather than spend 2 hours, going back and forth. But you could think about education and your commitment to education in the same light, and how you actually go about learning and developing yourself and your career. So that's a perfect segue, Mario. So thank you for that. Why don't you guys tell us about Crowdclass, what it is, why it's unique, and where it's all going to go? Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Crowdclass, it's very unique because we are a ed tech and a Web3 startup at the same time, right? We're not maybe the typical Web3 native company because we are trying to address real world problems using Web3 as a backbone. And those problems exist on the e-learning and online learning world, right? So our main goal is to kind of build the e-learning ecosystem of the future, unlocking the world's learning potential and bring online education into Web3. This actually means better monetization for teachers, incentivized learning for students, and also providing financial access to provide education to underserved communities, right? This is kind of the core goals for Crowdclass. And we want to use Web3 as a way to change education, right? And we want to leverage technology and the principles because there's a lot of principles around Web3. Web3 is not just a technological innovation to address several issues that exist in the learning market. And detailing those, we started to look a lot into the existing learning industry, which is actually one of the fastest growing industries in the world, especially after COVID. It is a $220 billion market. It's gonna double on the next 5 years. The number of investment made on ed tech on the last year was 4x the previous year. So there's a lot of disruption happening in the learning industry. And why? Because although it's a 15, 20 year old industry, there are consistent issues over and over again. And we usually highlight three, which are first, very high instructor fees, right? Some of the e-learning platforms that exist take up to 75% of take rates in exchange for distribution of courses for online instructors, right? Which is absolutely huge. We speak a lot about the creator economy. We speak a lot about rewarding better creators and removing the middleman. And on online education, the middleman gets 70%, which is whenever I tell this to anyone who is not in the industry, the reaction is always like, wow, really? So that's one. A second persistent issue is actually student engagement, right? And this is very particularly focused not on the business side, but on the actual mission of e-learning and online education, right? Student engagement is incredibly low. Less than 10% of the people actually finish the courses that they start. And it's something, as we speak with more and more instructors, passionate teachers, they care about this. They want to increase the engagement of their students. They want their students to be engaged, and they are looking for ways to also help them achieve that. And finally, and as I said, kind of a more impactful problem is that we're starting to see some solutions targeting these points that I mentioned, engagement and fees. But in the end, the solutions that we see around are more expensive courses with less access to students. And then what happens is that access to quality education becomes quite expensive and not accessible to that many people in the world, which, when we think about the original promise of online education, which is provide education access to everyone in the world, then when we start gating courses at $500 or $1,000 of access, then you're not really opening up the doors to education for everyone in the world, right? So these issues continue to exist on a 20-year-old industry. And when we start to think about Web3, tokens, blockchain, you realize that Web3 is all about new revenue models and new economic models, right? It's all about incentive mechanisms. It's about open and transparent finance. It's also a lot about community, social interaction, peer-to-peer. And these are all principles and technological advancements that make a lot of sense to solve these issues that I just mentioned, right? And so that's how we came up with the idea of Crowdclass. And in the end, our big vision is to make Crowdclass this ecosystem. And we have three main elements that we are envisioning on this ecosystem. The first is a decentralized protocol to distribute online courses, right? With a token-based economy that's particularly designed to reduce the fees that we charge instructors, to drive student acquisition, and guarantee that there's a shared benefit for the network growth among all users, kind of a user-owned learning network. The second one is an open app ecosystem to give tools for instructors to build what we called Web3 powered courses, which are courses that have gamification elements, that have learn to earn rewards elements to them, that have community learning elements and peer-to-peer learning elements to that. All of this designed to drive engagement, incentivize positive behaviors in the students. And finally, our third element of this ecosystem is that we also want to create pools for direct funding and open in a transparent way to allow sponsors and benefactors, because there are a lot, and we've spoken with some, that are interested in helping and financing education for others, but they prefer to do it in a more transparent manner, which currently doesn't happen if you go through typical institutions. We are black boxes regarding the funds, how the funds are distributed, and so on. This is what we envision for Crowdclass. It's a new ecosystem with Web3 as a backbone, but targeted to real world issues and worldwide issues. And yeah, we are now working on our MVP, and we are planning to release the first product to kickstart this pretty soon. And maybe Mario can speak a little bit more about it. Is been actively working on our first product.
Sure.
Hey everyone, this is Pete. Let me tell you about the folks at Philip Lee. A few years ago, I was at my first venture capital industry dinner in Dublin, and honestly, I felt a bit lost. I bumped into Andrew Tizali, one of the partners at Philip Lee. He bought me a pint and introduced me to the team, and they took me under their wing. That take you under their wing approach has been what I've heard consistently from fintech and crypto startups who I know have worked with Philip Lee in Dublin and London to help them wrap the right legal framework around their business, fundraising, and regulatory needs. And I can't recommend them enough. Get in touch with the team at philiplee.ie or on moneyneversleeps.ie/philiplee to learn more.
Yeah, so our first MVP is we're focused on solving the engagement issue, particularly, and getting clues on how to solve the other ones, okay? So what we are basically doing is we're creating a tool that allows any online teacher that has whatever type of online course, wherever it is hosted, that allows them to issue crypto rewards to increase classroom engagements and differentiate their course from the competition. It's as simple as that. So it's a tool where a teacher can register their course and they can set up types of rewards that increase engagement. So what does it mean to increase engagement, and why is this important? One thing that is missing on the online education part is the human factor, right? So when you go to a physical class, you kind of make an unspoken contract with everyone that you are going to be there, that you are going to participate. But in online, often people are like hiding, and not showing up. And what we know for a fact, and if you look at like constructionist learning movements, for example, or best practices in pedagogical circles, is that peer-to-peer learning, where people learn with other people, and discovery learning are essential for better outcomes when it comes to education. And that is something that is lacking in a lot of online learning. Not even talking about, if you go to self-paced courses, less than 10% of people actually finish the courses. But before that, we think that the experience can be vastly improved if we can bring this human factor to full. So that's what we want to do with this first tool. We're using technology and we're using incentives to trigger intrinsic motivations that will make learning outcomes better. So we will have a series of rewards to incentivize students to have the right behaviors that make the experience better. For example, incentivizing questions, incentivizing helping other students, incentivizing, sharing great case studies. These types of things can make more of a difference, we believe, than just incentivizing outcomes, right? Because the research says something different.
Yeah, you got me thinking deeply now. So, some of the easiest things it feels like you can do with this is, and it's because it's education, and I think this just makes it so logical that you put something like this in place. So obviously we're talking right now, and if this were on Zoom, we have the option of creating a transcript for that, or on any one of these mediums, we can create a transcript of that, and we can track and see who's speaking. And if you're doing online education and you're engaging with other people in your class, you can't just speak for the sake of speaking as if you were going to be rewarded for that. So that's just the idea, right? So who is engaging in the class, and that then creates a ranking of who gets rewarded in, in certain ways, right? And if you think about how this is done in the Web3 community with Discord and seeing people level up in Discord and be able to get access to the whitelist and be able to get access to, say, the next level up of NFTs, there are bots that are run that looked at, okay, how is this person engaging? So you can apply that same thing to education. It's probably a heck of a lot more straightforward to do it, to be able to assess how people are engaging. I'd say automating that and scaling it is going to be the big challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. How do you scale this? That is one of the challenges that we're trying to solve. Because when you have a small course of 5 to 10 people, cohort based, maybe it's easier to ensure engagement. But when you have a course with 1,000 people, 10,000 people, self-paced, that is much harder. But I will add one thing there. In at least in our approach and from the research that we've done, you don't want to make this a competitive game. I mean, there's always a little bit of competition, right? You want to make this a community thing, right? Where when everyone is working towards a goal, you're going to achieve it. So for example, when you think of rewards, maybe you don't reward the best question, you reward great questions, right? Just it's these little nuances of how to use technology and financial or other crypto incentives to trigger intrinsic motivations and peer-to-peer learning experiences. Like this bound between the technology and the human factors, it's very interesting and delicate to get it right.
Yeah. It's almost like how bonuses can be paid in the corporate world, where you've got a portion of your bonuses paid on the achievement of group objectives, and then a portion of your bonus that is paid on the achievement of individual objectives. Right? You can do the same thing in a classroom setting with community approach.
But maybe here, for example, some rewards can actually be given by the students themselves to other students.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, that's the type of thing that we are developing and owning with several teachers for this first product.
Promoting peer-to-peer is super important for us, and promoting peer-to-peer behaviors, especially on online education, we've been seeing that it works very well, right? So how can we incentivize those types of behaviors? How can we create tools that reward community-based behaviors, peer-to-peer and social learning behaviors? Because sometimes, and not sometimes, a lot of times, when you learn the most is from the people next to you, right? You absorb the knowledge from a teacher, who sometimes is a subject matter expert, but then where you actually acquire skills or the education actually sticks is through the interaction with your peers, or through a peer that is maybe slightly a little bit ahead of you on the knowledge, can kind of help you get there, right? And incentivizing these behaviors for us, it's also very important for us, and make sure that they are embedded in Crowdclass. And again, for us, that's Web3. These types of principles, they are also Web3 principles, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And you're, in the nature of Web3 and Packy McCormick's definition of the developer and user-owned internet orchestrated by tokens, that you have those that are developing educational content, right? And letting them own that. And then those that are using educational content, whether it be the instructors, presenters, or the students themselves, and letting them have a piece of the value that's created out of all of this. And it's distributing that out, right? The economics of it, and I just can't help but to think of Jeff Bezos and his saying of your take rate is my opportunity, and that that 70% take rate that you mentioned, that the educational platform, so you can bring down fees for this to a considerable extent while still driving, a profitable community around this, right? Because that take rate is just so damn high right now.
Yeah. And that's, that's our bet. Our bet is that instead of the value going to the platform, that we can bring the value to the students, and that will actually decrease audience acquisition costs, and that will make audience acquisition efforts more sticky, because the value offer is that much higher for the student. So it's a true, student and teacher owned learning environment, and not owned by a nameless brand platform.
Yeah, that's just skimming off the top. Well, sorry, not skimming off the top, but
not skimming off. It's the
take rate. It's the take rate.
It's
what
take
it
rate.
is for the marketing, the availability, the accessibility.
Exactly, and exactly. It's mostly used in marketing, or many times used in marketing in these platforms.
All right, and for the longer term vision, right?
Yes.
You guys know I'm a fan of Ready Player One, and I'm thinking about high school kids in the year 2045 are learning completely in a virtual world. and that the school that they go to is on a specific virtual planet because all that they have on that planet are schools to keep the kids out of trouble in the virtual world, right? And all of your educational content is fully delivered in a virtual setting. What does this look like for Crowdclass when we start approaching the Ready Player One vision of all of this?
Yeah. So I this is a fun question, Pete, and thank you for that. I would say, first, I'm talking a little bit about what we can look at the metaverse for learning, and then second, what that can mean to us. I think, when you talk about metaverse learning, and if people, go on YouTube and search for learning in the metaverse, you will get the meta announcement video, and they imagine this world, you're learning about ancient Greece. And so you're going to ancient Greece, almost like a video game. And there's a bit of that, but I would highlight maybe two elements, something like called the global human factor and fun, right? And talking a bit on this first one, I think in an age of, globalized competition, globalized conflict nowadays, unfortunately, automation and AI, we think that, I think that bringing the same level of quality education all over the world, it's something that will help teach everyone on how to navigate this new world and truly trigger the next stage of globalized, both financial and societal evolution. So, and what this can mean is that, for example, right now, if I'm going to class, if I'm a kid and I'm going to a class, most of my colleagues are people from my neighborhood. But when I'm working and when I'm living, it's a globalized world, right? So why aren't classes truly global? I imagine I'm taking classes with people from Asia, from Africa, from South America, and we're doing this online, but then there's a big difference that the metaverse allows, which is maybe you can do this and you can say you can do this in our current environments. But the difference is that maybe after this, maybe I can go, for example, I can go together with them and live on adventures, right? I can go to the, picking up on big fans, right? I can go to their metaverse stadiums with these people and I can live experiences with them. So you truly bring the human factor to education, but you can do it with the metaverse at a true global scale. So you bring the social delights and the social pressures of offline learning, but to a global scale. And this is something that we think the metaverse is uniquely positioned to do. And at the same level, I think there's a level here of composability, and we will bring it back to Crowdclass in a second, which is, right now, if a teacher is his own island many times, right? So particularly K-12 teachers, due to the pressures of current academic environments and in universities, teachers they're great people, they're really passionate, but it's so bureaucratical. If you want to change something, you need to go through 5 committees because these are the way things are done, right? But suddenly in the metaverse, maybe the teaching position is completely different. Maybe there's people, maybe there's creators, architects that have created metaverse learning environments, right? It can be about math, it can be about physics, it can be about history. And when your function as a teacher or an educator is to be a metaverse guide. So you're guiding your students in a discovery journey in these more game-like environments, and you're monitoring their progress and seeing where they need help and maybe showing them different ways like, oh, you're not getting it? Maybe we can go to this other world that someone else created and maybe you can learn it there. Or maybe it's this thing that you're more interested in. So it's more of a guide function in the discovery, in the facilitating the peer-to-peer levels. And I'll go to this composability part in a bit. And then the second factor, so this is a little bit on the composability, what the human composability, the global one, and on the learning experience one. But also the other one is fun. There's the great late Seymour Papert. He was an MIT researcher and the creator of the constructionist learning movement. And, one of the things he said was that the reason most people don't like school is not because the work is hard, it's because it's boring, right? And we know people, adults or kids, they don't mind hard, Like one of the most popular games right now is called Dark Souls. It's incredibly hard. And they don't advertise themselves on being easy. They advertise themselves on being hard and fun, right? And so we can come up with non-skeuomorphic ways of teaching that bring the fun in the way that you interact with others, in the way the subjects are explained, in the way that you discover the subjects. And then this can just vastly improve the experience at the global scale. So we think these two elements, will make a difference. And when you think of Crowdclass, right? So on the long term, we have our MVP, we have our long-term ecosystem vision, right? So if we become, if we have the economy and the protocol where content is registered, where content is hosted in a decentralized way, where the exchanges of values are through a certain blockchain environment. For example, if one education creator creates an educational environment, and then some educator guide brings students there and guides them through it, maybe part of the revenue that the guide makes can then flow back directly to the metaverse architect. Or maybe you will build a metaverse learning experience. For example, I want to make a music school, right? But maybe what I'll do is that there are all these environments created, one to teach guitar, one to teach music theory, one to teach this. Why don't I just bring them, I just curate them, right? And I guide people through it, and then the revenue I make flows back to them in the appropriate shares, right? And we see ourselves as being, a mediator of this exchange of value, both financial and on a learning level. So this is what for us is very exciting. This kind of new financial infrastructure, new composability infrastructure, and honestly, bringing fun and bringing, the human factor to education at scale.
Absolutely. I can see how much things like VR headsets that are used right now, mostly in a gamified environment, but when you put it in an educational environment, you could see people are focusing. Where are their eyes going, right? That is one of the newest developments in VR is how are people's eyes moving, right? And how are they breathing? How are they speaking? What is their tone of voice? There are things right now that people put into sales platforms that are recording a voice, hopefully with permission, that says, based upon the words this person is saying and their tone of voice, this is the kind of personality they are. So if this is the kind of personality they are, they will respond to certain sales techniques, right? You can use that in a much more humanitarian way with education to try to when is somebody bored, right? Do you need to change tone? Do you need to introduce different content based upon the fact that all these different sensations can be monitored by the instructor? There's just so much opportunity there. Filipe, any thoughts from you on the longer term vision?
No, Mario gave a pretty good overview of what we think, and yeah, I think again, Crowdclass is, like I mentioned in the beginning, our main vision is Crowdclass to be working as a backbone for these developments, as an economic layer for the learning industry of the future, right? But yeah, and having an economic layer that's decentralized, that's based on smart contracts, then you can have experiences that are unified, but they can partake a little bit on the metaverse, a little bit on a Zoom call, a little bit on a forum, a little bit on a fun game. And again, with a composable approach, they can all be tied together. And that's also one very important aspect of Crowdclass. And as for the future of education in the metaverse, I think that there's a lot of opportunity there too, and we will certainly want to be involved. I believe that VR headsets are on the tipping point to become commoditized.
Yeah, they're not yet. They're too clunky.
Not yet.
They're too clunky.
They're too clunky.
Any vision around this space needs to be married with the expectation that VR headsets will evolve to the point where they will be something far more accessible and far more usable by people.
So nowadays, everyone has a gaming console, right? Whether it's a PlayStation, Xbox, or Nintendo, or whatever. But almost every household has one of these. I'm pretty sure that in 5 years, every household will also have one or two VR headsets. Even if they are not always connected, they will be used for different experiences. And when that level of commoditization arrives, when they are more easier to use and not this big clunky thing, a lot more experiences in the metaverse will appear, and education is totally primed for that. And we can see that happening in the next 5 years for sure.
Bringing it back to the here and now, what do you guys see as the biggest challenge for 2022 and hence your biggest focus?
Yeah, so our biggest challenge and focus is very simple. We want to finish our first version of the product, our MVP. We want to launch it, we want to test it, and we want to have teachers and educators using it, helping us improve it and grow a community around it. So we are 100% focused on that. We will release the first version on a private test phase by the end of May, beginning of June. And our main goal in 2022 is to have the product launched, being used, and being iterated and continuously improved with user feedback. Our continuous challenges and what we are working on is working on how we then transition this to the bigger ecosystem. There's a lot that we need to work on the economic side, on the economic model. So that's definitely one of the challenges that we see arising. And of course, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have and we set for ourselves is how can we make sure that we are actually improving learning? Okay, this is something that we really are focused as we are developing the product, developing the incentive mechanisms, developing the economy, doing fundraising, doing product development, hearing feedback from many people is, are we actually making something that makes learning better, right? We are trying to make peer-to-peer learning work at scale, but again, we don't want to enter into a position where it's about the incentives or rewards more than the learning. No, learning is the core, personal development is the core, and we are conscious that it's a fine balance and a fine line to navigate. But we know where we want to head, and that's certainly a big challenge that we know is how can we make this work in a way that it's sustainable, that it works for us, it works for the economy, but it also works on the actual most essential part of the ecosystem, which is learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And, how do you measure all that, Mario, so that when you are positioning this product out in the world and driving the marketing messaging around that, how do you actually position this to say we are improving learning?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. So the way we do it is through the engagement part, right? So that's where we position ourselves, is that online teachers are desperate for engagement because it knows makes their life easier, makes the outcomes better. So that's what we do. We enable you to increase engagement in your class, right? Teachers, I mean, if we're all humans here. Filipe has mentioned like the problems that we see in education where teachers are underpaid offline. It also happens online many times, as we've seen. They're not capturing most of the value that they create. And then on top of this, they go teach classes, and most people have their cameras off. No one asks questions. No one asks this. So they know, because in their heart what they want, and also as like anyone that is educated at any point, you genuinely want people to learn and to come out of this better than before, that they're able to do other things, right? So what people tell us often is the engagement part, is people interacting between each other. So that's what our message is very much about. That's what we're helping to promote. And then we have another sub-layer, which is on differentiating their course from the competition, right? Because that's also an interest that the teachers have in one point. But right now, it's the engagement part that we are positioning, ourselves. We enable you to increase engagement in online classes through crypto rewards.
Okay,
That's how it goes.
That's a killer point there, because you can sit there in an online course with 30 other people, even if it is live and being delivered live, and not participate at all. But there, from culture to culture, the willingness to ask questions in a course differs considerably based upon that culture's tendencies to not wanting to put people out, right? Or, make a big deal about something. So sometimes people just don't ask questions. And I guess it's creating the environment where you can have this engagement. People just learn more, because I learn more when someone asks that question I'm afraid to ask. And you get that engagement, you get that back and forth going with the instructor and with student to student. So
online education can be a great equalizer there, because a student that asks questions in a live class is not more valuable than a student who share a case study or has discussions in a forum, right? So how do we bring all these types of people and all these different cultures into the fold and incentivize the behaviors in a way that brings everyone on board and creates a better experience for the learning community?
Absolutely. And speaking of questions, the final question that we like to ask everybody on this podcast is, what is one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about you? And Filipe, we will start with you.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting question. I guess I can share something about my teenage years that probably not many people actually know. Is that I still am, but when I was younger, I was a very big fan of hip hop and rap music. Eh, Yes, mostly Portuguese, but also I still love the classics, and I'm a big fan of Wu-Tang Clan. But I actually had a hip hop crew where we had a band. We did some recordings that are lost in some drawers in mine and a couple of friends drawers. And then, yeah, I had a hip hop band.
Wow.
We went a lot to the local movement, did some graffitis also. And
Wow.
so
That's
prob-
awesome.
That's probably something many people don't know, but yeah.
That's great. No, I'm right there with you, 1990s. And people know this about me because every episode of this podcast, for the most part, gets named after a hip hop track. So the last one with our friends from Big Fan
Yes.
and shout out to Eugene O'Brien and Kurt Pittman was Drop It Like It's Hot, right? The
Yep.
NFT drop. So we're going to have to think of a good one for you guys. Mario, what about you?
So if you've spoken with me for less than 5 minutes, you wouldn't have learned that I'm a big Eurovision fan. So I've actually sent my voice has appeared on the Eurovision stage. Last year, Iceland got 4th place. And the singer, Daddy Freire, he actually asked people to send him recordings of their voice singing like 6 parts of the chorus of like as a background vocals. And so I was one of the people that one of the few hundreds of people that sent the voice, and he put all of them there. So I appeared on the stage, and this all comes from a big love for Eurovision, which I just think it's the greatest, just a festival of joy and inclusivity, and a lot about having this European, inclusive spirit of celebration of differences that I really, really love. So I'm a big, big fan of Eurovision. Not that you ask, but I will say my favorite for this year is the Dutch entry. I think they have a really nice song. And I know, Pete, you're living in Ireland for a while. I'm not a biggest fan of the Irish entry, but I think it can still make it, maybe 30th place, 20-something place. That's my prediction for the Irish entry.
Yeah. That's we had one other person on this podcast who gave that answer, that they're a big fan of Eurovision. I forget who it is, but I will find out and perhaps connect you with them.
Yeah.
Please.
Ireland are the recordists of Eurovision, I think, though.
Yeah, it was like going back to 94. It was like when I was first in Ireland in Galway in 1994, whoever it was, I forget who it was, won that year. It might have been 93, 94 that they won. But guys, listen, it's been an awesome chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
I feel
Pete.
so much more closely connected now, which is a good thing. So really looking forward to having you guys back in Dublin in June. But before that, I know we'll be talking a hell of a lot more.
Yeah,
yes,
of course.
Yes, we will.
And I'm really looking forward to see which track do you select as the name for it.
I'll find a good one. But
yeah, Bruno is also a big hip hop fan, so you have a few critics here.
Okay.
Waiting for that name.
All right.
Thank you, Pete. Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
That does it for this week, folks. Thanks to Filipe and Mario for opening up their minds, help us figure out why they do what they do. Links to get in touch with Filipe and Mario and learn more about Crowdclass are in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early-stage startup investor and advisor focused on where fintech meets crypto and crypto meets Web3. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, drop me a line on info@moneyneversleeps.ie. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!